And we're live for the very first episode of the Fantasy NBA Tonight. I'm your host, Vince Miracle, and joining me as promise is the founder and creator of hoop-ball.com, the one and only, the legend, Aaron Bruski. Aaron, what's going on, man?
I'm working on trying to stare at this green dot here, and then I also got to get you off this. My God, I'm getting my ass kicked by the technology here tonight. I'm good now. I'm good. I figured it out. I heard way too many Vinces and way too many Bruskis in the background, and that means I had like 3 windows open at the same time. So my apologies, Hoopball listeners. I'm very bad at this, but I'm staring at that green dot, so I feel like I'm doing all right.
You're looking pretty good over there. I can see there's a monster behind you. So for what we expect to be a show to where we're going to answer a lot of your guys' fantasy questions. You guys purchased the draft guide. You guys became premium subscribers to hoop-ball.com. First off, I want to say thank you to all of you guys who purchased that item and became premium subscribers and members to hoop-ball.com. And so to thank you guys for what we're going to do is answer a lot of your questions. This is supposed to be a face-to-face almost meeting for us to talk to you and answer any fantasy questions that you guys may have, whether it be about the draft guide, whether it be about what's happening in your league, a dynasty league, roto league, 9-cat, 15-cat, or 15-team, anything that you have going on. We're here to answer that for you. And, of course, I didn't want to do it by myself, so, of course, I had to bring the creator, AB, over there. And once you guys start shooting in your questions, we'll pause whatever we're doing and really start answering those right away. But until the questions start coming in, AB, I thought a good idea would be to look over today's games. I know it's just preseason, but to see what's happening in the preseason and see what players could be trending up, could be descending down in fantasy drafts. And I think the first game we got to start off with is the Miami Heat against the Brooklyn Nets, because that side just did blew up for an amazing 21-point, 14-rebound night. And not only that, he got 4 blocks. You see something like this. What are your thoughts on Hassan Whiteside this season?
I like Hassan Whiteside a lot. I've got him very high in the Bruski 150 and higher than I thought I would, maybe even 3 weeks ago. This is a guy with a lot of question marks in terms of maturity, his health, just questions about whether or not he can actually do it. We're talking about a guy in elite fantasy territory, and it's a lot to ask for a guy that wasn't even in the NBA a couple years ago. So those thoughts have been swirling through my head. But the more that, Chris Bosh, his situation, with Dwayne Wade, his situation, this team has now moved into being a very fast and small team, something that I think actually helps him out. He's embraced more of an offensive role. He's taking face-up jumpers. He's hitting free throws, or at least he did last year. I think he's just going to get a lot of easy buckets. And we know he can rebound. We know he can block. We know that all of this is going to be pretty high percentage stuff. He's still not going to be a guy that kills your field goal percentage if he does take a lot of shots, because he's not going to be taking 18 shots a game. And if he does, they'll be mostly dunks. So I don't think that Hassan Whiteside has a lot of downside other than his injury risk. Now, where do you take a Hassan Whiteside? I would currently right now take him in the middle parts of that first round. And a lot's going to depend on what falls to me. The top 5 in this draft, to me, is pretty easy to say who they are. So once you get to 6, 7, 8, and 9, that's where I think things get interesting. And you might actually see somebody from the top 5 fall. But yeah, Hassan Whiteside, he's in that 6, 7, 8 range. And that's actually a tough spot to pick this year, because you're going to have Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, and then Hassan to choose from.
You brought up the player that I wanted to bring up with you, and that's Anthony Davis, and comparing the two between Anthony Davis and Hassan Whiteside. When healthy, Anthony Davis was once projected to be a number 1 first pick in fantasy drafts. And, of course, because of the injuries, he's, of course, fallen, and now people are getting kind of scared of picking him. But health on both sides, who do you think could have a bigger fantasy year of the two?
Well, that's obviously, to me, is going to be Anthony Davis. His stat set supports top one upside, number one overall upside. And Hassan Whiteside, no matter what kind of a year he has, that's not going to be the case. He cannot be the number one fantasy play in all of the land. And I don't care if he blocks 4 shots a game and gets 15 rebounds a game. It's just not going to happen for him. The number one fantasy slot, is reserved for a guy that fills it up in about 7 or 8 categories. Anthony Davis can do that. He's going to be able to get you a bunch of assists from the big man position. He's going to get you rebounds, points, steals, blocks, and maybe even occasional 3 or 2. But the thing with Anthony Davis is going to be the field goal percentage, and we just don't know, is he good enough offensively to kick the inefficiency issues that we saw? And the inefficiencies really, it was hard to pin it on him last year because he had such a bad surrounding cast. It was their first year in Alvin Gentry's offense. I don't think Alvin Gentry knew what he was doing at the time, and I don't think that Anthony Davis knew what he was doing at the time. Now he's in year 2. They've been able to look at this, for about 18 months now, I think, with better teammates, and in particular that backcourt. That backcourt is really strong now compared to where it was last year. So I think you're going to see better decision-making from the team as a whole. The downside to the new backcourt is it's another new group of guys that's going to have to take time to mesh, and you wonder, is that going to be able to come together? So Anthony Davis isn't going to have a surefire bounce-back season. His efficiency, I do think, will improve, but you're probably looking at him in that 6, 7, 8 slot, or pardon me, closer to the 6 slot, because he can touch the sky. You put him ahead of somebody like Hassan Whiteside or even like a Kawhi Leonard. It's a risky pick. I don't think anybody's going to be comfortable doing it, but that would be your rationale for taking him 6. But you're gambling. I mean, he could play 66 games. And the one issue on the gamble that I'd bring up is he's never played 70 or more games. At some point in his career, he's got to cross that threshold. So why not this year? He's as young as he's ever going to get. And that's Captain Obvious talking right there. But for us to sit here and say he will never play 70 games in his career, that's a little bit ridiculous. I don't think there's an NBA player out there that hasn't touched 70 games. A good player that plays a lot of years, that has a good career. I don't think there's one that's never been that locked out of the 70 games. So I think if you're looking at Anthony Davis, why not this year?
And like we said in the beginning of the show, we want to start answering your guys' questions. I'm monitoring the chat board, the live chat board right now for all of your guys' fan questions and your fantasy questions for us to answer for you, the Draft Guide subscribers and the premium members of hoop-ball.com. Aaron, ever since we started the show and we started talking about Anthony Davis and Hassan Whiteside, the questions started rolling in. So I know we said we're going to do the stop whatever we were doing and start answering these questions, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And our first question comes in and says, 10-team keeper league, who should I take between Marc Gasol, Dragic, or Gorgui Dieng? Other keepers are Draymond and Millsap.
You're going to have to hit me with that one more time. I didn't see a tweet. Was there a tweet that went out?
I don't know if a tweet actually went out, but I think these are all for our the emails that we sent out to all of our Draft Guide subscribers. And I'll run down that question one more time. And guys, keep submitting in those questions. Like I said, I am monitoring the live chat very closely here. It says it's a 10-team keeper league, and he asks, who should I take between Marc Gasol, Goran Dragic, or Gorgui Dieng? Other keepers are Harden, Draymond, and Millsap. So I'm thinking that's his team right now, and he wants to know who he should take between Gasol, Crowder, Dragic, and Dieng.
If the question is who do I keep in addition to Harden, Draymond, and Millsap, which I would say are his keepers here, who do I keep? If I'm looking at a keeper of that group, it would probably be I mean, there's not a lot of separation between these guys. He said it was 9-cat, right?
10-team keeper league. That it didn't specify how many categories it is.
I'd throw caution to the wind and probably keep somebody like Jay Crowder. I think that his game is not necessarily predicated on high volume scoring, so he'd be able to bring what he brings to the table right now to any team if he was to ever get traded. Marc Gasol, while he has a lot of upside, big men with the foot injuries and kind of just in general the knee injuries, I think that he might be somebody I'd shy away from. And Jang, you just worry about him getting traded to a bad situation and how his game would translate. Love his fantasy game, don't get me wrong. But, on a good team, he could end up being a 25, 28-minute guy, and that would not translate to quite as much upside as you would think with Jang, who's been a per-minute monster in his career. Slowed down a little bit last year. His fantasy game's really held up on the strength of his free throw shooting, which is an interesting wrinkle there. And he, to me, also profiles as a guy that might end up developing a jump shot and starting to move away from the hoop. So, I'm really splitting hairs with which of those three to keep. Now, if his question is actually which one do I draft, he's looking pretty good up the middle being like shooting guard through power forward. I'd probably go Marc Gasol if I'm looking at somebody to draft with this kind of a team build. Millsap, Draymond, and Harden, they don't really trend any which way. There's not like a negative here. I don't think this is like a punt build by any means. So I'm probably going to go with Marc Gasol, land my big man. Then I'm solid. They basically just need a point guard in this case, and just pray he doesn't get hurt.
All right, next question here says it's a 6-cat league with no position requirements. Harden, Steph, or Westbrook with the number 1 pick?
6-cat league.
No position requirements. Who are you taking number 1?
Harden, Steph, or what was the third one he said?
Westbrook.
So 6-cat basically is going to be no turnovers with 3-pointers included, points, rebounds, assists.
An offensive league, it seems.
Steals and blocks. And did you say 10-team or a 6-team?
Or it didn't say 6-team. It just says 6-cat league.
6-cat league. Okay.
Basically seems like it's going to be an all offense, probably field goal, free throw, threes, rebounds, and assists.
It's tempting to go Harden here because I think Harden could very well be the right pick. I think that there could be enough volume there for Harden. But I think the play is Westbrook. Westbrook could be a walking triple-double this year. He could end up giving you 25 points, 8 boards, 8 assists, a couple steals, a couple blocks, a couple threes to round that 6-cat line out for you. Whereas James Harden might average 30, 5 and 5, a couple steals, a couple threes. It's going to be close between those two. I think if I did the math and what I just said in my head, that's probably looking at like 45 points. If every category is worth 1 point, you're looking at 45 there. But with Russell Westbrook, who's got the hardest name ever to say fast, because you can always say Russell Westbrook, it's 25, 8, and 8 would be like 41. And then if you get a couple steals and threes there, you're looking at 45, 46 points. What I see with Westbrook that could be different, though, is we could see something truly phenomenal that in a standard league I'm not all that excited about because he's got holes in his fantasy game when compared to the other top 5 guys. But in this type of a format, we could see Russell Westbrook go for like 28, 9, and 8 or something absurd like that and pile on a couple steals and threes. And then his average score for you in a week might end up being 46, 47, 48 points versus Harden, who's going to max out probably at 45 in that scenario. So I'm going to take Russell Westbrook.
I'm actually going to disagree with you, AB, on this one. I actually really like James Harden and what he says to be a 6-cat league. If it's the 6 cats that I'm assuming that it's going to be, which is going to be field goal, free throw, threes, and assists, that's 6 categories. It's all offense. What does James Harden do very well? He shoots threes and gets to the free throw line. Another thing that he does better than Russell Westbrook is going to be field goal percentage. And the fact that he's going to be playing point guard a lot more, you're going to see the assist numbers going up. We've seen that throughout the preseason. And his rebounding numbers aren't terrible either. And so he gets to the free throw line more than a guy like Russell Westbrook and shoots more 3-pointers than knocks him down more than Russell Westbrook and can still provide big numbers in the rebounding and assist categories. I think that can be what jumps Harden over Westbrook. That's me. That's my personal thought on it.
My personal thought is, can we get a tweet on this thing? I want to see a tweet. Can we get a tweet?
I'll tweet it out after I do the next question. Again, you guys continue submitting in all your questions. I'm reading through the chat board here, and I think this is a good one because we're both Sacramento guys, AB. And he says, "What's your take on DMC?"
This is all about the field goal percentage. I said this earlier with Jason Ross on the Locked On podcast. And it's always been the case with him. I mean, we know he's going to turn the ball over. And yes, we can complain about the turnovers. That is something he needs to clean up. And I think he'll clean it up to a certain degree this year. But what really prohibits him from being a fantasy stud and what's really hurt him in leagues over the last few years is that field goal percentage. I feel like they've made a half step to putting him in the high post. And I agree with that to a certain degree because he's got a lot of mobility, and off of one or two dribbles, he can be absolutely devastating out there. And I like the way that it sets up the rest of the offense. So I'm all right with that. But in terms of pure fantasy talk and even just individual performance from DeMarcus Cousins, you'd love to just see him on the block and turn, get fouled, go to the foul line. That's also another part of his game that people have overlooked. He lost something at the foul line, and it's something, I don't know if it's confidence, if it's form, if whatever it is. So he's capable of shooting better than he shot last year, and he shoots a ton of free throws. He shot 10.3 free throws last year, I believe, per game. And, that's Shaq-like in terms of volume. But the field goal percentage is just going to kill him because if he shoots – he had a good year with field goal percentage last year, all things considered. He increased his three-point attempts up to like 3.4, something like that. And typically that's going to kill – especially a big man's field goal percentage. And a lot of people talk about the three-pointer being an important or a good thing for a big man. Well, no, not really. It takes their field goal percentage and it pulls it down. So he took about 3 more shots than he normally did last year, and his field goal percentage held basically steady. Now, anybody that watched the Kings or watched DeMarcus Cousins knew that he was just deployed in the most ridiculous way possible, and it just absolutely killed his efficiency. So he could have had a better season. He could have had a 48, 49% season, and that's really what he has to do. If he gets up to 50%, now you're talking about a top 6 asset in fantasy leagues, and in 9-cat leagues, I don't think he'll be quite as good because he'll have a nasty turnover number. But everybody's talking about DeMarcus Cousins as this upside guy, and he has all of the tools, and he can be an absolute monster. This guy could go for like 30 and 13, 32 and 14, and still give you about 4 assists. And people don't realize he had like 1.5 steals, 1.5 blocks in that ballpark. To get that combination of numbers is very rare in the NBA. So he's a defensive stat monster, and it all just goes to hell the minute he has a 45%, 46% field goal percentage on 20 attempts a game.
Let me ask you the question that it seems like it's not what it seems like. I think it's what the people want to hear because you have Hassan Whiteside so high. There's a guy like Anthony Davis that we talked about a little bit earlier in the show. Where are you taking DeMarcus Cousins in your fantasy drafts?
I'm not going to get him. I'm not going to get him at all because I don't think I want to take him in the top 8 or 9 picks. Now, if say they come out over the next 2-3 games in preseason and you see them go to him in the post a lot, and we're talking about in terms of a preseason game here. So the starters might play a quarter or two, and they'll have that final game where they take it seriously, and the starters might play deep into the third quarter and maybe even a little bit of the fourth, and they'll run their normal rotation. They're gearing up for the regular season. If you start to see him get, upwards of 5 to 10 legitimate post touches where he's planting himself down there on the block, and that's the focal point of the Kings game plan, that will tell me that Dave Yeager believes that he should be on the block, and that would make me move him up. I would probably at that point in time consider taking him at 8 or 9, because if that one little aspect of his game changes, his value just shoots through the roof. And so that's your key right there. And the one thing that we won't get to see that's unfortunate is I think there'll be a point in time where Dave Yeager, his back will be against the wall. The Kings will need buckets. They'll need to win in the fourth quarter. And we'll find out how much he believes in DeMarcus Cousins in the post, because he'll scrap his offense to go to that. And then we'll look at that and we'll say, oh, we wish he would have done that sooner because I would have picked him a whole lot higher. Because I think when it works, they're going to say, you know what? We got to go to this a whole lot more often.
The viewership is starting to go up on this thing. I sent out the tweet just like you asked me to do. Please don't make me have to go run laps. We talked about that today on the Fantasy NBA Today show.
Oh, you told him I'm making you run laps, huh?
Or I didn't actually tell him. That was Dan Besbris, but I couldn't hide it after he brought it up. but since we were going to make this private, this very first show private, and have it just for the draft guide people. And unfortunately, due to technical issues, we weren't able to do it for this show. But this is actually going to be a premium subscription show. And the good news is that because
I'm a man of the people. I wanted the people to be able to see this, so I made an audible.
He made an audible live on the show. He said he wanted a tweet, so I sent out a tweet, and our viewership is going up. So if you guys have fantasy questions, I'm actually monitoring the live chat very closely. We're going to be doing this show for a good hour. It may push into like right around 11 o'clock. We may extend a little bit, 15 minutes over our hour time, and we're taking all of your fantasy questions. So get in that live chat and start leaving all of your questions. And hey, do us a huge favor. If you're not a subscriber to this channel yet, hit that subscribe button and also hit that thumbs up button so we know that you're liking this show.
If I had known we were going to 11, I would have said you had to bring me at least some fancy beverage.
I saw the monster behind you. I thought you'd be okay.
Oh, just energy drinks? Okay. All right. I see how it is, guys.
It is Fantasy NBA tonight, so you never know. One of these times you might see him with a margarita in his hands. I heard you've married into a Mexican family, so I'm saying margarita.
They don't drink that stuff, man. That's profiling.
I'm going to move on to the next question.
That's profiling.
Don't call me Trump. Next question here. It says, Vinnie Mac. I'm guessing that's me. What's up? It says, Vinnie Mac, with the latest injuries to guys like Gordon Hayward and Ray Jacks, etc., is it better to wait a week or two before drafting, or am I just being paranoid?
In our big money leagues, we wait. And it's because nobody wants to pay a big old entry fee and then have their number one, number two guy go down to an injury. I wouldn't even want my most hated opponent out there to have to go through that. It sucks. Top end guys are so important in fantasy. So that's why we wait. And I wouldn't see why you would do it any differently in a friends and family league or a pride league, you know, whatever you're playing for money or fun, bragging rights. I would wait. But there's some value to the flip side of the coin, as long as everybody's okay with it. I mean, you're just basically taking a measurement at that point in time of what values were when you were drafting. But I would wait.
I mean, with a guy like Gordon Hayward, is he going to be out like the first month of this season? I mean, he has the potential to bring close to early mid-round value. I mean, I already stamped Ray Jacks with someone else's headache. I'm not a huge fan of Reggie Jackson, just because I think he gets a little overdone a little bit. But I think Gordon Hayward, especially with the Jazz trying to push for a playoff spot, is going to take a bigger role with that team. I know there's more weapons there offensively to where the ball could be out of his hands, but he can pass the ball. He can shoot the three-pointers. He gets to the free throw line with some consistency. Are you still, even in a big money league, are you still fading away from a guy like Gordon Hayward, even though he could possibly only be missing the first month of the season?
That first month of the season hurts, man. It's when I did the math on Hayward, I wanted to say it's like 11 to 18 games, depending on when he comes back. And not only are you taking the hit in terms of pure value, cutting an eighth of your season off, you're also hampering your lineup, because say you've got 12 roster slots that are active and 4 for your bench, and you don't have an injured reserve. I suppose if you have an injured reserve, this issue isn't as big of a deal. And I don't really like injured reserve slots, just throwing that out there. You keep that guy on your bench. Now you only have 3 reserve slots to cycle in 4-game weeks. A 4-game week compared to a 3-game week is 133% of the value of the 3-game week. And so what you find is winning fantasy teams over the course of the year, they have less injuries, they have better options to pick from. So you're always optimizing your selections. You're looking at your lineups and you're going, I can start all 4-game weeks. And your value over the aggregate over the course of the year, it really is. It's different than if you've got two guys that are injured and maybe a guy that's struggling, and you're sitting there putting in low-end guys for 3 games in a week. That hurts. So taking on an injured guy, I've done it. I won with it last year. I took Kyrie Irving, and I won in my big money draft. And, it was because I had Steph Curry. And so maybe, without having one of the best fantasy seasons of all time, it doesn't work out like that. But I remember Kyrie burning a hole in my bench. And I've had, seasons that I didn't do as well, where a lot of it came down to those injured guys on the bench. So with Gordon Hayward, I think he probably will be overdrafted because I don't think people really realize what 11 to 18 games can do damage-wise to your fantasy squad. So I'm probably staying away there.
All right, guys, like I said, we are taking all of your fantasy questions. Continue submitting in all of your questions here in the live chat as Aaron will run through them as fast as possible and answer all of your fantasy questions. I want to thank you guys all for tuning in with us here on the very first episode of Fantasy NBA Tonight Live. As I'm looking down here, and the question is 9-cat 10-team league. He has the 10th pick, or he or she. It says David. So David has the 10th pick. I have a feeling Whiteside will fall with on the 11th pick.
Oh, is that like Paul George question mark?
I kind of did with a little up in my voice, so it's like a question.
Paul George is a great pick there. Here's the thing with Hassan Whiteside though. I mean, yeah, you might want to consider going for guys that are block neutral or block deficient because you can only win the blocks category by so much. So if you keep loading up on guys that would be traditionally solid fantasy picks, the guys that I like to take with the money counting stats, you might find out that at the end that you've got too many blocks. So you might look at guys that don't get blocks. And, I think Paul George is semi-neutral in that category. But Paul George is just a first-round guy. So if you're getting him in a 10-team league, and I should clarify that, he's not like a guaranteed first-round guy, but I think that if you're coming out of the first round with Hassan Whiteside and Paul George, you're not going to hate yourself in the morning, and that's going to be a pretty good strategy for anybody in a fantasy draft. 9-cat. I might actually. I'm going to come back to that after the next question. I'm going to see if I like anybody else better than Paul George in that spot.
Well, I mean, just for me, I think getting a guy like Paul George who's going to be able to fill stats across the board, he's going to have those nights where his field goal percentage may take a dip because he's taking so many shots for that Indiana Pacers team. It's actually, in my opinion, a really good pairing because Whiteside has a good field goal percentage as well. He's starting to knock down his free throws, so he's not going to hurt you in any category this season. So if you can get him at the 10th pick in a 10 team and pairing him with a guy like Paul George with a potential end of first round value, I mean, I think that's a good pairing for sure.
Yeah. I just wanted to check a couple things. I'd go with Paul George.
Very simple. We'll just go with Paul George, and we keep moving on down here. And
what did I miss? Did I miss something?
Short answer. I wasn't expecting it to be just that straightforward.
I think that's a way of saying I'm long-winded.
Next question says, am I nuts to think Jeremy Lin could be a 16-6 guy?
No, not at all. That's probably exactly what he will be. The assists sound right in his wheelhouse as far as what he normally gets. They're going to give him every opportunity to get those assists. 16 points I think he'll definitely get. And the thing with Jeremy Lin, though, you got to look at his year-by-year minute totals. He's never been a guy that can play 30-plus minutes per game. I think that he will come close this year, but they would probably be a lot smarter if they played him 28 minutes a game, 29 minutes a game, and didn't bury him in the red because, I mean, the history just shows he's going to break down. So if that's the case, then you're looking at some of these backups like Isaiah Whitehead, who I think at some point in time will be a hot pickup in fantasy leagues.
Are you picking a guy like Jeremy Lin? Would you consider him a late middle round flyer? Is he a late round flyer? What are you considering his value being the starter in Brooklyn?
In an 8-cat league, I'm looking at him probably in that top 90 range. You know, he's definitely not going to be somebody that I draft, because I think people are going to end up picking him a little bit earlier than that, maybe like top 80. And I will probably in that range be starting to stack up guys that I have in my top 50 that fall to me in rounds 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And Jimmy Lin just won't make the cut for me. But I mean, I'm not going to begrudge anybody that takes them in the 8th round, but I probably want to wait till the 9th round and the 10th round. And in 9-cat leagues, I think that you have to be even more careful with something like that, because at the bottom of the top 100, a nasty turnover number, like a 3.0 turnover number, can knock you 50 ranks down, 60, 70 ranks down. And that's going to be a bad basketball team. They're going to turn the ball over a lot. He's a high turnover type of guy. So I would watch out in 9-cat leagues.
Here's actually a really good question, and it's the very first question that we're going to get, questioning you on your B150. And not really questioning you, but just asking about your confidence and a lot of the numbers that you have. And this question comes from Tim, and he asks, you have Rubio and Deng rated pretty highly in the B150. How confident are you in the minutes? Deng at 31 minutes per game, up from 27 minutes per game last year.
You have to remember with Jang, he had the Sam Mitchell treatment last year, and I don't think you're going to see that quite as much this year. I mean, they were benching him for Bjelica, and that was kind of ridiculous. And also keep in mind that with Jang, I believe I had him at like 40 last year, and I believe that's where he finished last year. So, and the year before that, I had Jang, I want to say, in the top 90 when he was a nobody. And then he came onto the scene and was like a top 50 guy. So I've had the pulse on Jang. I feel very confident in Jang. If anything, I feel like he might not progress this year as much as he probably should. But even with that built into my model, he's still very high on that list because he's got that fantasy-friendly game. He's got the free throw shooting, which for a big man is just awesome. But you know, that high percentage free throw shooting is going to carry lower minute totals. But as far as minutes go, I mean, really, it's hard to see anybody knocking him out of a 31 minute per game posture. So with that said, I'm very confident in that. And then Ricky Rubio, I actually have him pretty low for minutes, but with Tom Thibodeau, he really likes to play his starters a lot of minutes. And I think there's space in that rotation, even though it's crowded, even though you have Chris Dunn there. I think that, you know, for Ricky Rubio to hover around 30 minutes per game is not asking a lot out of him. And then if he gets traded, then there's I don't want to say very high probability, but a pretty good probability, better than 50% chance that he gets brought in to be a starter level player. So I think his chance of increasing his minutes in a new location, it's probably better than the idea that they go down. So, yeah, I'm fine with each one. And the thing with Rubio, last point there, his game is so steady. I mean, you know he can't shoot. It's a low volume of attempts. You know what he's bringing in steals. You know what he's bringing in assists. We know what he's all about. And that game's going to translate wherever he plays. He's not like a Rajon Rondo where he takes over the entire imprint of the team. He just does what he does, and I think that translates to any location in the NBA.
If Sabonis gets the start in OKC, is he?
One more time, Vince.
If Domantas Sabonis gets the start in OKC, is he worth a look late in drafts?
Yeah, I like Domantas Sabonis late in drafts. Now that's debatable. So like in a 12-team league with 13 roster spots, you might find that it's not worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze on a stash, because that's really what he is. I don't think they're going to just jump out, say, you're the starter and here's your 30 minutes per game and now go to work, kid. I think they're going to mix in Ersan Ilyasova. I think they're going to mix in Joffrey Lavernier. I think Enes Kanter, especially if they want to showcase Enes Kanter for trade. Enes Kanter, Steven Adams, you know, presuming Steven Adams doesn't have some crazy ankle injury, and I don't think he does, they're going to all get their minutes, and Domantas will get brought along slowly. He might play 18 minutes per game to start off, and that's when we're looking at stashes You got to look at your league size and what their value and what in a best case is their value going to be. Are they going to be, in DeMontis' case, I think it might be like a top 100 guy. That's not really justifying the roster spot in a league that's 150 players deep. Now, if you're talking about a 200-player league, now I think the juice becomes worth the squeeze, because at 100, this is a guy that's going to be in your lineup 3/4 of the time, probably during all of his 4-game weeks. And in his 3-game weeks, he will probably be in there a decent amount. So that's a guy that's worth putting at the end of your bench and seeing what he can do.
Question here says 12-team 9-cat. Is Giannis a legit first rounder, or is the potential / upside train running off the track?
Oh, it was running off the track a long time ago.
Oh.
And yeah, well, I love Giannis, love what he's got going on. Love his post All-Star break numbers that everybody's talked about so much last year. And yeah, there's potential there for him to make everybody that's fading him look silly. But, I gave him a healthy jump in just about every place that I could think of. Really respected his ability to improve. And the stat set's just not there, especially in a 9-cat league where he's going to be not only playing, with a team that's not going to be great, but you lose Chris Middleton, and now you're playing Rashad Vaughn. I mean, talk to Josh Lloyd over at Red Rock Basketball about Rashad Vaughn, and you'll get a quick sense for how screwed the Bucks are for this season. Now Brogdon's a good prospect. Jason Terry, I think, will fill in, but you're pinning your hopes on a 38, 39-year-old basketball player who shouldn't probably play more than 21 minutes a game. Point being, if they don't make a trade, and I think they might, I think that team could be pretty bad, and his turnover number could be like 3.7, 3.8, 3.9. I mean, you can't even almost rule out 4. For a non-point guard. Let's be clear, he's not a point guard. He's a decent ball handler with freakish skills that can run portions of the offense. So it's not really a point guard. And if he's not defending a point guard, it doesn't even matter anyway. So I don't think let's go 8-cat leagues. Let's take the turnovers out of the equation. I still don't think he will be able to perform at the top 12 level that he'll need to be at in order to justify that kind of a pick. I think he's a top 20 guy. I really looked hard at it once Chris Middleton was out, and I just could not find the justification. He's going to have to take one of those steps that you're not able to predict. Like, you can't just go and be like, this guy's going to score 10 more points per game. Like the Stephen Curry jump. Like predicting that Stephen Curry was going to jump that far from one year to the next was unpredictable. Like, you cannot make that prediction unless you're like, Biff Tannen from Back to the Future or something.
Well, hey, let me ask you this then, staying with this Bucks team. Who do you think benefits the most from the Chris Middleton injury? Is it a guy like Dellavedova, who was playing for the starting point guard and now is starting because of this Middleton injury? Is it a guy like Jabari Parker? I mean, who's on your radar now that Middleton is out for presumably the whole season?
Nobody, really. I mean, Dellavedova gets on the radar as a low-end point guard play. Michael Carter-Williams, first of all, Michael Carter-Williams looks lost out there, and it's early, it's preseason, and that's fine. He's got a fantasy game that actually translates pretty well. In an 8-cat league, that is. In a 9-cat league, this isn't true, but in an 8-cat league, he can be a top 100 guy pretty easily, and they've got nobody else to go to. They can't even trade Michael Carter-Williams right now because they don't have a point guard who could step in, and no, Giannis is not a point guard that can step in and be the backup. There's just nobody there to do that. So Michael Carter-Williams is going to get 25 minutes per game, even if he's playing terribly. And that will translate into some top 150 value. And if he plays a little bit better, he can get up to that top 100 value. And if he has a great year, you're looking at a top 75 asset. So I think Michael Carter-Williams might be the dark horse to be the winner there. Now, how long he lasts in Milwaukee is totally up for debate. I see a 3-4 team deal involving Milwaukee, Charlotte, New Orleans, and Sacramento, or some combination of those teams, moving around some of these assets, Rudy Gay, Ben McLemore, Greg Monroe, Michael Carter-Williams, Spencer Hawes, Jeremy Lamb. There's too much smoke brewing in this thing to make me think that that's not going to happen. And the question is, does it pop before the season, which I think is what the coaches would prefer, but you get these general managers involved and they want to wait and see how much they can get. And a lot of them might want to wait until the trade deadline.
All right, guys. Again, I just want to give a huge shout out and say thank you all for joining us tonight on the very first episode of Fantasy NBA Tonight Live. We're going on for another 30 more minutes. We're going to continue taking all of your questions, all of your fantasy questions. So if you're in the live chat, leave your questions and we'll answer them here on the show. Again, huge thank you to AB for joining me on this late night. And next time we'll remember to bring you a very special drink. So
I could do an energy drink. I mean, there's no energy drinks.
There's one right behind you. It's just I just don't know if it's empty or not. All right, next question here. It says, when do you recommend implementing a punt strategy? Mind going into draft or mid-draft?
It's a mid-draft. I don't punt. I understand that it's a viable strategy. I also don't like to play in head-to-head leagues. I will play in head-to-head leagues, and I am in a bunch of head-to-head leagues. I just don't like the idea that we're going to play an entire season and then have a playoff system, for 3 weeks when the NBA increasingly rests their guys down the stretch. You got teams that are tanking. Everything off after the All-Star break is basically crap to me. So I don't like head-to-head for that reason. Now, I understand a lot of you play that, and so we have to assess that. And the punting, to me, it does a couple things. One, if you're going to do the classic Dwight Howard, Andre Drummond, punt strategy, you put yourself into a different bucket than all the other owners that are drafting. And so, yes, you can focus on free throw deficient players that are great everywhere else. And yes, you can win as a result of that. But my question for those in that strategy is, well, what happens when one of your big guns gets hurt? So Dwight Howard gets hurt, Andre Drummond gets hurt. And now you got a team that might not be a great punt free throw build. So where do you go from there? You're really banking your season off on these guys that, it's just one or two players. Now you're increasing your margin for error, put it on those two guys' backs. There's an argument to be made for it. It cuts your player pool down for players that you can add. And you can also make a counter argument to that and say, well, nobody else wants those guys, so you can get them pretty easily. A lot will come down to your waiver wire settings and how you handle waivers in your league to determine if that's a good thing or a bad thing. What I don't like about the punting strategies, I feel like you can achieve just as much with good balance and keep your team from being subject to the whims of chance and the unknown. I don't like having to look for guys with a certain build. And, because what if they're just not available for whatever reason? I just would rather have a team with balance that just dominates in every category, or I can win any category in any given week. So, but to answer your question, if I am in a draft and there's just an excess amount of value on the board and it directs me towards a punt strategy, you're damn right I'm going to take that. And Basketball Monster has a really good tool. It's called their draft tracker, and I use that pretty religiously. So if you find in your draft that your team is trending one way, absolutely, you hang a left and you got to go with it.
With the punch strategy, is it one of those things that there's certain area? I mean, maybe sometimes in punting, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe are there times in punting where you're not necessarily getting guys that are just the worst in that one category? Let's say a guy like Andre Drummond and getting him just be good in free throws. Let's say kind of like a Thaddeus Young, who's not great at free throws, but he's also not terrible either. And you're just picking him up because of what he can do in other areas. I mean, do you consider that punting as well, or do you think that is what you're saying is having more of a balanced roster? Like, what is your definition of punting?
It's team management is what you're talking about right there. And it's, you can do the opposite of punting, which is overload in a category, which is why whether you're using a software like a draft tracker, or I used to have a spreadsheet that would just put, color coded, If somebody was good in a category, it would be like a green. If they were bad in a category, it would be a red. And I would just copy and paste those into a blank sheet. And so I could just visually see, what do I got? Do I got a lot of great blocks, guys? Because if you're going to win the category by 20 blocks every time, you get the same amount for beating the guy by 1 as you do with 20. So there's different ways to track it. I think that's more of a team management situation. And it's just something that you got to keep an eye on. And drafting in a head-to-head league or even a roto league is a little bit of a science like that. Again, that's why I like balance, because say I'm six picks deep in a draft and I'm balanced, I can go any which direction I want. The minute you declare to the opposition that you're taking Andre Drummond or DeAndre Jordan or back in the day, Dwight Howard, some idiot can grab the other guy and then you're fighting over the punt build. And if you're too deep into that, now you've completely ruined your draft strategy. Yeah, maybe you can climb your way out of it, but I just don't. I mean, there's so many things that are. I like to control the variables and make sure that I'm dictating the win. Letting it go to the 11 guys in your draft, and somebody might be a beginner or somebody might be just completely crazy. I have seen guys go for different builds as a result of not wanting to get caught in the Dwight Howard thing. They'll go for like a field goal percentage punt. They'll go for an assists punt. I even see this in our championship roto leagues where you're never supposed to punt, and these guys are trying to find that edge, and they always get like second or third.
Who always gets first?
I don't always get first. No, those leagues are too good for that.
I try to tee it up for you just so you can say it. I try to tee it up for you, AB. Next question here says, anything auction specific coming to the site soon to look out for or that I'm overlooking now? Keep up the great work, guys.
No, the auction stuff is coming. I want to say Thursday night. It's a big deal. Obviously, we want to get that right. And so I foresee that coming out on Thursday night, if not by Friday morning at the latest. So keep an eye out for that. And auctions, to me, that's where the pinnacle of fantasy drafting is, when you have that element of strategy going up against the other owners. And the thing about auction drafts, since that's kind of a general question more about the site content, is a lot of strategy goes into that. So when you see this auction, why I kind of wanted to take a step back and take a different approach to it is I had a different idea than I was going to go with. And that's I want to almost educate you almost on the draft process while also informing you. These are the guys that I'm willing to spend up on. B, find a way to communicate this to you guys in a way so where you don't go take this thing in there and go, oh, this guy is $32 and I'm getting him for 16. That's a great deal. Well, it's a great deal at a certain stage of the draft. If you're at the end of the draft, all these dollars are relative. So you have to take, if you have 12 teams and $100 per team, and you have $1,200, $100 at that stage is a 12th of the pot. At $600, it's a sixth of the pot. So all these dollars are relative, and you want to remember that in your draft strategy and look at it as a way of how do I get the guys that I want? Who am I willing to take chances on? When am I going to spend? What's my strategy? Am I going to go early? Am I going to go late?
Talked about Gorgie Dang a little bit, and we talked about the Minnesota Timberwolves and the minutes that could be divided up of what Tom Thibodeau could be doing. A lot of people started talking about Bjelica and how he's been getting right around 20 minutes a game during the preseason, and they're saying that's probably where you could project him to start getting those minutes in the regular season. I actually like Bjelica. He put on a very good start of the season, kind of fell off toward the tail end of it. I know he got injured, and then he kind of lost his minutes in the rotation. But I see him coming into this season. He looks good in this preseason. He can do a little bit of everything. What are your thoughts on Bjelica?
I think Tom Thibodeau might, send him running laps around the building. Man. Bjelica was terrible defensively last year. There probably wasn't a player in that in the league as bad as him when he was getting all those minutes last year, which is why I think people were frustrated in Minnesota that Gorgie Jang wasn't playing, and Sam Mitchell was doing Sam Mitchell stuff, trying to make Gorgie Jang earn it while seeing what he had in Nemanja. This year, I think 20 minutes it's reasonable, and it just depends on, can he not get exposed in the pick and roll? If he can cover the pick and roll, then I think I can see the 20 to 25 minutes. Now, the next question for fantasy owners is, can he be valuable in 20 minutes per game? And we saw that he had trouble being valuable with 30 minutes per game last year. So he'll have to take the proverbial step forward. I'm not going to peg him inside the top 200 anytime soon. And, he could easily be like a top 250, top 300 guy.
I love questions about this site. And here's another question about the Bruski 150. We answered one earlier, and here's another. It says, if the Bruski 150 is for Roto, how should I use it when it comes to head-to-head?
You're going to have to take a little bit of a kind of a qualitative approach here. Obviously, the Bruski 150, it's got a lot that goes into it. It's both statistically driven as well as good old-fashioned gut. And that doesn't lend itself to hey, let's just chop off the turnovers here, and let's chop off this and chop off that, and go for those head-to-head builds. Now, the other thing about head-to-head versus Roto is there's a lot of talk about, well, how does a guy like Otto Porter or like Kawhi Leonard from back in the day, though you notice nobody says that about Kawhi Leonard anymore, these guys that are highly efficient, that don't have the big popcorn numbers, where do they fit into a head-to-head league? And my question to you is, or my answer to you is, that this all is a Z score. All of this comes down to, you have 8 or 9 categories. You get a 1 for a win, 0 for a loss. And so these free throw percentage and field goal percentage categories, they're important. They're just as important as all of the other categories. And that's why you have to look at normalized scores through sites like Basketball Monster, who I live at religiously. So, hey, what's up, Ken? Free advertising. You got to look at it that way. So I don't personally downgrade a guy who might be quiet with his statistics like an Otto Porter in a head-to-head league. Now, I realize there's a lot of people that do, and a lot of it has to do with the punt build. So with a head-to-head, what you want to do is take these guys like the Otto Porters of the world, like the Thabo Cephalosas of the world, who, even though he's not in there. I'm struggling to think of examples, and I probably just need to look at the list and they'll pop right up into my head. Take them, if you believe in that theory, or if you're punting, you're going to want to drop them a little bit. I personally don't put a lot of weight into that, so I wouldn't drop them too much. But a lot of smart people out there do, and I can see why you would do that. So if it's a turnover guy and you're talking about a punt build, and you wanted to look at where does Dennis Schroeder, where do I come into play? Well, you could look at the 8 cat versus the 9 cat rankings and get a pretty good sense of that. But, he's going to have some big old popcorn numbers. And if you're like, well, I'll just punt the field goal percentage and, punt here, punt there, you could put them up a couple rounds. So you're going to have to do that manually. And I would also, if you take the projections that we've put out there, and we're going to actually expand on those a little bit. Part of the trouble with all this is when we put out too much information, a couple things happen. 1, your competitors get it. 2, the other websites get it. And all of a sudden, the value that you guys are going to get in your picks, it kind of starts to evaporate a little bit. And that's when you see things like Rudy Gobert last year. He got hurt, but the big box sites are sitting there screaming his name for 5 months. Now he's just overhyped, overvalued, and the profit margin has been stolen from you guys. And we want you guys to win. So we're going to actually be a little bit more discreet about how this information gets out there. And in our projections, the things that aren't in there right now are some of the weighted volumes and things like that. But you could take those numbers. You could go over to we got to get a deal with Ken over at Basketball Monster. We've pushed so much business to him. You go to Basketball Monster and you upload it, and then you can look at different punt builds. Or I should not say the site name.
You go to that site that has great projections that most fantasy
that we
owners should
love.
be going to.
That site that we love, and you know what? And Josh Lloyd, who we love, you go there and listen to all their great content. And so Ken, give me a call.
Well, I think you brought up something that was very important that I think we should bring up since we're getting to the closing minutes of the show, and that's are going to be very discreet with a lot of the things that we're doing, especially on this show, because we're going to be talking a lot about what's in the Bruski 150, what's in the draft guide, because this show is for our and we got to tweet out the show, and everyone got to watch this show live and got to get their fan questions, and they got to hear from the Bruski 150 man himself, Aaron Bruski, on today's show. And so before we end this show, I would love for you guys to leave all your guys' descriptions here in the bottom in the live chat about what you guys think about the show. Hit that like button. If you have not subscribed to the show yet, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Here, AB says, from one AB to the other, actually, projections look very similar to last year, but there are comments around his improved offense. Where might the improvement come?
I think you're just going to see a guy that can handle a little bit better. I think his range is going to get a little bit better. The hard part is the depth in Boston is so real. I mean, you got RJ Hunter would be in the rotation and maybe getting six-man, not six-man of the year talk, but like kind of that Seth Curry hype that you're getting in Dallas. I mean, he would get way more justifiable hype than Seth Curry would, because I think RJ Hunter is a better prospect and probably even a better player at this point, just given his size and his ability to do different things on the court. But he might not even play, and that's Boston for you. Marcus Smart is a guy that's going to be searching for minutes. They're trying to, figure out ways to give Jaylen Brown minutes, but their front court is filled up. So they're talking about playing him at the 4, playing him at the 3. If you start to fill up those 3 minutes and you got Jay Crowder sitting there, now your 2 is just completely locked up, and you got Avery Bradley, Isaiah Thomas, and all of a sudden Terry Rozier is the man in Boston, and rightfully so, because he's got a good game and, he's developed. And, kudos to Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens for what they've done there. I mean, these guys have a load of picks, a load of, young talent, overseas talent. I mean, they're going to have to make a move at some point. But, Avery Bradley, for all of his improvements, how that translates into actual production, I don't think it's going to be a great jump. But I really like the player. There's some injury risk there. A couple things shake out. I could see him being a top 50 guy. You get a couple guys get hurt, traded, and, I think that he's going to surprise a lot of people with his offensive game.
This is going to be the last question, and this question isn't actually in the chat board, but you brought up a guy like Jaylen Brown, and I think it's a question that a lot of people are having now that Ben Simmons is going to be out for, I believe, 6 months. We at least won't be seeing him until 2017. And so, Joe, what are your thoughts on, 1, drafting rookies, and 2, who do you think who's the player in the lead right now to win Rookie of the Year?
Rookie of the Year, eh? I'm going to punt on that for a second. I'll talk about Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown might be the worst fantasy player in the league that plays more than like 20 minutes a game or 15 minutes a game. If you play in a whack fantasy league where you're looking for guys that get minutes but don't produce, that's going to be your guy. His shooting numbers are going to be terrible. His defensive production has basically been non-existent to this point in his career. Statistically wise, I think he's going to be a fine position defender. That'll be what he hangs his hat on this year. Drafting rookies is tough, man. You're really looking at about 1 or 2 guys every year that can make the cut. The statistical chop, or whatever you want to call it, from NBA to college, it's as much as a half, 2/3 in a lot of cases. They don't get great minutes. Efficiencies are terrible. So I don't see a lot for a lot of rookies. Now, Rookie of the Year, there are not a lot of good choices. I think Chris Dunn is definitely a candidate. I don't think it'll be Brandon Ingram.
prediction, and I was asked this, and I'm going to go with another Philly guy because when there was a weak draft a couple of years ago, and that was Michael Carter Williams, Joel Embiid, and Dario Saric. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Saric. I'm surprised nobody asked that question. We'll save that for the premium version of Fantasy NBA tonight. Saric, I think, is going to play a lot because he's going to have to play a lot. He's going to be one of the very few distributors that Brett Brown trusts. Yeah, he could easily be Rookie of the Year. And as far as Embiid goes, he's not going to be able to do it. He's not going to be on the court enough to win the award. Everybody would have to be terrible, and then he could have a chance.
All right, Abby, that is our show. I know I said we try and push to 11 o'clock, but when you start seeing your viewers decline, I think that's when you know it's time to sign off. So I want to, again, give a huge thank you to everyone who joined us on the very first episode of Fantasy NBA Tonight live, which will be for our Draft Guide subscribers and our premium members over at hoop-ball.com. Before we sign off here, IB, can you give the fans your final thoughts, what you think about this show on the very first episode, and how you feel about working with me at nighttime?
It's rough, man. It's really rough. I gotta just put it like that. But I'll persevere. I can survive. I will survive. No, I love the idea of this show. I love what we're doing here. I love everything that's going on at Hoop Ball. The site is just exponentially grown, and everything is way better. You know, numbers wise, metrics wise, all the business stuff you want to talk about. But the fantasy side, I feel like we're putting out a compelling product. I feel like we're competing, if not beating, you know, everybody else out there, you know, with respect to everybody that does what we do, I guess. You know, others do other stuff. But I just like the quality of the product. That's the most important thing to me. That's why I started Hoop Ball, is I wanted high quality content to deliver. You know, if you're going to do something, you do it right. And so I'm happy for that. I think this show is going to be important, getting information to you guys so you can hear the tonality, you can see, you know, what's going on. You can fire questions in as fast as possible. And your guys going to get questions in here that you're not going to get in at other sites because we're doing these every night. The medium's better. And yeah, you know, anything to add value. So thank you guys for your business, and we'll see you soon.
Just to rattle off the last few things of what the fans are saying in the chat board here, and it's if one of them comes from it says Movie Dude is his name, says I love the site, guys. Cheers, guys. Really enjoyed the format and the in-depth and considered answers from AB. Have subscribed and we'll be back. Cheers for picking up 2 of my questions also. That's from Tim. And then it looks like Dan Bespris is watching, and he says, look at these 2 handsome gents. And so, yeah, that was our show. You guys follow him on Twitter at Aaron Bruski. Follow the site at Hoopball Tweets. If you haven't bookmarked the site yet, go bookmark hoop-ball.com for all of your in-depth fantasy analysis. Follow me on Twitter at VM Center. These shows will be live every single day, Monday through Friday, and even on the weekends. AB, you're going to be hosting a Sunday show covering the waiver wire, and does that start this weekend?
No, there's no waiver wire. So I get a reprieve. It starts whatever week 2. The first. Maybe the week before the season. I don't know. There's some waivers that run. This is a waiver wire show. This is for fantasy addicts. You know, if you're in a fab league, free agent acquisition budget, which, by the way, I think is the only way you guys should be playing. It adds so much fun to a fantasy league. Who cares about waiver wire order or first come, first serve? Even though that can be a little bit fun, racing to the wire to see who figure out. You know, what got tweeted about somebody's ACL. You go in there and you add the backup, and everybody hates you because you're blue cheater all day. The free agent acquisition budget makes everybody have to think. And what you want to have is kind of a confidence ranking. If I'm going to make a big budget play in the early third of my year, which I might recommend to you. You want to know if I'm pulling the trigger. Is the guy pulled the trigger? It's hard. Everybody had the answers. They would just give them out and that. So that show I will be hosting, and I will be talking about my own auction plays, which might be the dumbest thing that somebody just like printing out the 150, giving it to competitors as you walk into the draft. I've done that for years. They take it, print it up, bid me up on all my guys. It's terrible. But I figured, you know what? If I'm gonna give that information out, you gotta pay me, $17.99.
Yeah, I think your audio is freaking out a little bit. Sorry, guys, and I think that means we're gonna definitely end it on that note because for a little bit towards the end there, you started sounding like a transformer, AB. So again, follow him at Aaron Bruski. I'm at VM Center on Twitter. And until tomorrow night,